Hello and welcome back to another torch review. I have the S30R Baton III in today for testing. This is a sample that was supplied by Olight. I've laid all of the items that are included in the pack on top of the desk here so you can have a look. On the front of the box, just a few specs at the bottom. And on the side of the case so we can see the charging dock is included and the battery, and just a quick QR code on the other side. Now onto the back you get quite a few more features listed out here, so you can pause that and have a look through. You do get the high capacity 3500 milliamps an hour battery. We have up to 1050 lumens, and zooming in a bit closer on the specs you'll see the settings for this particular torch. There's a drop down to 500 after a couple of minutes, high level of 500, and a new super low 0.5 lumens. Cable length with the micro USB is 50 centimeters. You also get the standard Olight strap, which is pretty good quality. You get a low profile adjuster and it has a bit of stretch. This is the new micro dock 3. This has a USB pass-through port. You can charge up to 1 amp on that. Now you might think there's not much difference, but on the underside they've added sticker pads, so suction pads, so you can actually stick it to a flat surface. And I'm just showing you the torch, how it snaps into place on that for the charging. Now looking at the user manual, pretty straightforward. This lists out some more of the specifications on the torch, and again the run times for the different power outputs. I've generally found them to be pretty accurate with Olight, if a little bit understated actually. Now running through the operation and use, we can see there are some additions here. We have a direct access to turbo, strobe, and the timer is a new function with this particular torch. There's also a lock function as well. Now I'm just going to list out the key differences between this and the version 2, which was the prior model. You can see that the output's increased a bit. The lower level moonlight mode, candela rating slightly different. There's slightly less range but a wider beam. It's also a bit smaller, and you have some cosmetic differences as well as the timer and lockout. Now you'll notice that the button isn't quite flush, but you have to actually push down a bit more to activate it. With the addition of the lockout function, that's not really going to be an issue at all for me. That works quite well. You can see there's a lot of knurling on the Olight torch, and that's pretty common with the Baton series. On the underside, that's the magnetic base, and also for the charging dock. And in the hand here, you can see very nice compact size. You can also attach the hand strap to the base cap if you wish. You'll see there's contact points here. That's because of the customized battery. We'll take the protection out here. This cell has the positive and negative terminals at the top. So that's because you can use it with the base cap for the charging. Just screw that back on. Now it's possible to use other batteries in this as well. Just make sure you put the positive side down. And you can also use the CR123A cells, the normal disposables or the rechargeables. They don't quite fit as tight as the 18650, but you won't be able to charge either of those in torch, just the custom battery. And there is a spring at the top section to help keep them in place. We're using a Cree XM-L2 LED, and it has a smooth reflector on this, about medium depth. Now the operation very much standard for the Olight torches. Just push and release when you've reached the power level. It does have a memory effect as well, or you can just hold it down, cycle through and let go when you're finished. Double click takes you to the instant turbo, and you can triple press for the strobe mode. Now if you push and hold, you'll enter the moonlight, half a lumen. If you continue to hold it, you'll enter into the lockout, and it has a momentary on function. So when you press it in for a short period of time, it comes on. Now to enter the timer, you double click and then hold, and you'll get a single or double flash letting you know which setting you've got for the auto power off. I'm comparing it to some other 18650 torches. You can see the Olight is quite a bit shorter, even though the Thorfire in the middle there is quite compact. It doesn't have a tail cap switch, obviously, because that's where the charging dock is. And I'm comparing it now to the S1A, which I reviewed recently. That's an 8A powered torch, or a 14500. You see there's a difference in size as you would expect. This is S1R. which is one of the smallest torches that I've used. It's not quite the smallest, I think, from Olight. So really going to have a choice between the design and size, and runtime, of course, is going to be a factor too. So with the S30R, you're going to get a significantly long run time and a higher power output. This is the red LED that comes on when the battery power is low. And you can also use the USB magnetic dock here. This came with the S1R torch that I have, but you can also purchase that separately as well. So they're interchangeable, both of them work. Now, snapping it into place here, just testing the power charging rate, and it's just under the 1 amp rating, which is pretty close to spec. I also use this sometimes, the magnetic dock, with a solar panel, USB input on that. And you can see it here charging. The red LED, that can be a bit tricky to see in bright sunlight. It was a very bright day, but it turns to green once the charging is complete. And I measured the termination voltage at pretty much bang on 4.2 volts, so that's excellent charging rate on that. It's also IPX8 water resistant. I leave it in here for about half an hour and no problems at all. Even though you see the contact points there on the magnetic base, that's not a problem. And the moonlight mode, half a lumen. I'd say it's slightly higher than the S1A that I looked at recently, but not much in it. This is the beam spread, so you see a concentrated beam in the middle with a spread around the outside. I'm going to start with the long range 90 to 100 foot test. I'm using the 18650, which is included with the torch, and moving up through the power levels. Now the turbo mode can hold for a couple of minutes on this one. It very gradually ramps down. You wouldn't really notice it. It's very subtle. You can see good wide beam spread on the torch. And I tried the CR123A cells and I couldn't see any obvious difference in power output. Handy to have as a backup, but I would personally stick with the 18650s for the longer run times. So a nice wide beam spread, but you do have a bit of range with this torch. And looking at the TR20, this has a slightly different beam pattern. It's a bit cooler, but you get a little bit extra range out of the Rofis, so it depends on your own personal preference for beam patterns. This is my standard wide angle test, starting off very low and then moving up through the power levels. Once you start kicking up to the medium to high levels, you get quite a nice spread from the torch on the edges. So even on the high level, I would say plenty of power, but you have that turbo there, which I'm at now, give that extra boost for a few minutes. Closer up beam pattern, about 7 or 8 foot distance. You can see that the camera shows a hot spot. It's not as obvious to the human eye, it's just the dynamic range of the camera, but there is a bit of extra punch in the middle. It's fairly well smoothly diffused into the rest of the image circle though. And we've moved up from high to the turbo on the telephoto test. The tree test again that I normally do, same for all the torches. You can see quite a wide spread on this. And I showed the beam pattern on the roof there. You can see again the camera's overexposed a bit in the centre, but you do have the central area is a bit brighter than the rest of the image. This is the test that I do down the side of the house. It doesn't have quite as floody beam as some of the torches, but it is a pretty good mix between flood, giving you a wide angle of view and giving you a decent bit of range. And what I've done is doing a test here on the building that I've shot with a few other torches, and you can see you get quite a decent range out of this. It's actually slightly less than the 2 version, but there is very little difference in terms of the power. The power is actually slightly higher on this model. Onto the moonlight, certainly happy with this. It's quite a nice low power level. And the strobe mode, just one single strobe with this model. There's no SOS included. When you're powering on the torch at a lower power level, you can see a sort of blue ring effect around the bezel. And when you turn it off, it glows in the dark. Although that doesn't last that long, I would like to see it last a bit longer. It's a sort of cosmetic touch. Now the battery came in 3414, so it's a touch under, but it is a bit higher than the 3400 mAh ones that I've used, so a decent result for that. Quick drop test, no problems at all. And I decided to put it in the freezer for about 3 hours, minus 18 degrees Celsius. And I didn't have any issues at all. It did fog up the lens on the outside. It's sealed obviously, but no problems at all with the operation of the torch. Now on the low mode, around about 12 lumens. If you've been used to using an older torch, I used to have a AA mag light, it took 2 cells. This is actually about the same sort of power, and you have a whole load of extra power modes up above that, so that sort of power level would be quite useful for day-to-day use, generally outside at close range, but you can also kick it up to the high or turbo modes when you need to give a good bit of extra range and spread. The base is magnetic, and despite the extra weight of the cell, the torch itself is very light. It holds in place very firmly. Didn't have any problems at all using this outside on metal objects. Very handy feature to have with that torch. This torch is really aimed at someone who wants a very compact 18650. Wrapping up with a quick summary on the S30R Baton III. Overall, very nice torch from Olight. I've been impressed with most of their torches. There are a couple of small areas that I would like to mention though. Firstly, the in-torch charging is again only with the custom Olight cells. Now you get the battery supplied with this, so that's not a huge problem, and you can use other cells, but you can only use the Olight cells that are customized for in-torch charging. If they could come up with a method of using a normal 18650 battery that you could use a charging dock, I think that would be a nice feature. Also, there is no holster supplied or spare O-rings, and I think at least one of them should be included in the pack, perhaps a couple of extra O-rings. I'm less bothered about the holster because this is the sort of torch which I would carry in a pocket more often than not. Now the stainless steel clip is quite nice, but it also prevents the torch from rolling, so I tend to keep that on the torch myself. So the positives are the compact size. It's definitely smaller than most 18650 torches. Got the charging base, which a lot of people like. You can also use it with the charging cable, and the design has been changed a fair bit in small ways, but you do have the side switch lockout now. You do have a lower mode for the moonlight and the timer, and the power output is excellent. Olight have generally been pretty close to spec with regards to their lumens output, and the battery is included is a decent quality one too, and you get good long run times out of that. So thanks very much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and don't forget to subscribe, where I'll be looking at other torches and similar products in the future.